And while we're waiting, we have 4 comments and 1 speaker.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like we're all set.
Okay, while we're waiting, we have 4.
Hey, Heather, can you let my device in? I'm trying to join on another device here.
Yeah.
And it says the host will let you in soon.
Okay,
All right, are we technologically all here?
we're all set.
Okay, welcome everybody. And thank you for making time so we could have a more nuanced discussion of the labor policy. And I'd like to start out, we have privilege of the floor. We do have some people that would like to share opinions with us. I think we received 4 written comments, and we have a request, I think, from Marcus Willamy to speak with us. Is he here?
Oh, we have Dave Marsh with us today.
Dave Marsh. Okay, Dave Marsh. Welcome, and you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, first of all, for taking, I know you spent quite a lot of time on this already. We feel, I say we, I'm talking on behalf of not only Labor's Local 785, but the building trades, that this issue is important enough that it needs to be considered more thoroughly. In 2015, some of you were board members at that time, and you remember that we filled the hall standing room only and asked for, you know, a labor policy that was somewhat robust as much as possible. At the time, I believe that resulted in a 30% ask, and that really isn't sufficient in my opinion, but that's my opinion. That's why you're now looking at something much more robust, and I hope that some form of that does survive your debate and is actually enacted, because I think it will make a difference. I think one of the things that is perhaps not as well understood in the construction industry is local developers know local contractors. It's the out of area developers that do come in and build sometimes large projects in our county, that you know, they don't have a relationship with our local contractors, and there is a comfort level with whoever they normally work with, and they will bring them along, and they'll also bring along their subcontractors and their workforce, and that's where we really get local labor really takes a hit under those circumstances. So what you ultimately decide to do today is going to have some impact on local developers. I think probably not as substantially as it is the out of area developer, but we all know Thomas County is where they want to build. I don't think anybody has any doubt about that. It's a lucrative market, and hopefully makes Heather's job a little easier. And that's mainly what I wanted to say. I know you got a lot to cover today. I do have just a couple things I wanted to share real quick. I gotta find my notes, sorry. So I looked at the policy as it's currently drafted, and I just did a quick, this morning I ran my numbers, which came out to in Tompkins County and surrounding counties, the counties you're looking at, which I don't cover 2 of those counties, but I do have some members that live in those counties, and that would be the North Seneca and Cayuga County. I have 302 members. So I'm one of 13 locals in the Tompkins Cortland Building Trades Council. So I'm going to extrapolate that out to collectively we have thousands of members. And that's just the union trades. That's not counting the local non-union commercial workforce. And so I don't know exactly what the numbers are. You could look at the Bureau's labor statistics, but that's going to include, I presume, residential as well. But we're talking about impacting thousands of people here. And that's just the direct labor. That's not counting their families. And I would also just say, and I've mentioned this before, that one of the things that we do, in addition to providing our active membership, our apprentices with healthcare, is we also have pensions. And what we see is a large percentage of our active members do stay in the area when they retire. And right now, on a monthly basis, I am sending out just shy of, I'm trying to remember what we're up to now. 300. Yeah, we just went past that. I guess we're right around 300, almost $400,000 in pension payments on a monthly basis. So, the part of the investment in local union labor isn't just short term, it is long term. So I just wanted to share that, just because some people are like, well, why is your package more than the open shop? And often it is. Well, there's an investment in the long term too. There's an investment in healthcare that maybe the open shop unfortunately doesn't have. So anyways, I'll stop there. I do have one question. It's an administrative question. Did you receive a written comment from Casey Eckler? All right, if I may, I would like to read that on his behalf. He wasn't sure if it went through. He tried to send it about 8 o'clock this morning, and
Yes, please. Go ahead.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
So Casey works for me. He is my field representative, and he's also my apprenticeship coordinator, which means he's responsible for going out and trying to bring in new people into our organization, the Laborers. So I'll read this quickly. My name is Casey Eckler. I'm field representative and apprentice coordinator for Laborers Local 75 in Ithaca, New York. I'm writing to support the local labor policies that are up for discussion today. I would like to say that I disagree with the concerns about finding local labor. It has been my experience that there are plenty of willing local people who are ready to go to work. As an apprenticeship coordinator, a portion of what I do is recruiting new members from high schools, trade schools, and several other ways. I have personally interacted with many young individuals that have expressed interest in the trades. If we could ensure that there is a local labor policy in place that would add security to our jobs, that would go a long ways towards recruiting more apprentices. One issue that I see is the amount of local work being done that is granted to out of town or out of state companies and their workers. And I touched on that already, which takes jobs right out of underneath our local members. Before I joined the union, I worked all over the state and surrounding states. I can say from experience that when I worked out of town, I sent my paycheck home to take care of my family. The money earned was not put back in the economy of the out area where I was earning it. This is when I was working out of town. Could you imagine the effect wage investment in the county this could have for the county if you had a 75% labor force? So I'll stop there because I do have one other thing I want to say from my perspective, and I probably mentioned it before, but there is a concern about affordable housing, and I think that is a concern you'll work through. I hope that you ultimately do pass a policy, but recognize that concern. What I would say is that, Pete, and I know you are because you're all very intelligent people, but be mindful that the end result of those projects is very few long-term jobs. Probably the most economic, from a job creation perspective, you're going to have on a housing project is the actual construction job. So I would ask you to consider that today as well. I'll stop there. Thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you. And Heather, as we've done in the past, I'd ask if we could alternate reading in the comments, because I'd like to make sure they're on the record. And I would
Sure.
pick the first one from Marcus Willamy. And he's the union representative and a Tompkins County taxpayer, is how he organizer UA Local 81. It is in the best interest of the plumbers and pipe fitters located at 701 West State Street, Ithaca, New York, that a strong local labor policy is used in conjunction with the tax breaks that this board affords to help developers build projects here in Tompkins County. We currently have over 200 proud union families in our local area that depend on development here in Tompkins County for their food, clothing, and shelter expenses. Our workers are just like you. They depend on a job to keep their families fed. They are here shopping local right next to your families. Their kids play on sports teams with your kids. They belong to the same clubs, fire departments, and gyms that you do. Our workers are different, however, in the fact that when there is no work in their area, they pack their bags and leave to go to Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Malta, Albany, sometimes as close as Syracuse. If there was a good, strong local labor policy, less of your neighbors would have to leave their families to go find work elsewhere. The time for a strong policy is now. A strong policy will only enhance the community, not stifle development. Who needs a break? The workers in the community or the developers?
Okay, next I've got Brian Notaboom, Carpenter's Local 277 representative. I appreciate your time and consideration on this timely matter. As many of you know, I'm a Tompkins County resident and local labor leader for the Carpenters Union. I'm concerned that we are going down a familiar road we did 8 years ago and end up with local labor language with no teeth or clawback provisions. As I and some others remember that the IDA board at the time passed a feel-good language to encourage local labor. This was set up to monitor the workforce as stats were gathered. This work has been completed by Heather's team, who has worked hard. This is much appreciated. Thank you. Now, time has come for the current board to act and be progressive, as we see in the positive data. Many other area IDAs have adopted similar language without all the dilemma. My personal observations, I see developers coming typically from out of the area and are given all the incentives to develop buildings and housing. This is great for the city and county. However, when building affordable housing, this creates the immediate construction jobs, but no long-term jobs like manufacturing facilities. This, to me, is an opportunity for all of us in labor and government to create a pipeline for these workers to enter the construction field. This, everyone, is biggest growing sector in Tompkins County, not manufacturing. So this leads me to my final statement. Let all of us as leaders in this community stop handouts and start giving a hand up to a great career in construction. This means creating good opportunities with apprenticeships and local jobs and paying the area standard wages and benefits to construction workers. Thank you again for your consideration.
Okay, then I have a letter from Frank A. Stento, who's the Director of Business Development, Painters and Allied Trades, DC4. TCIDA board members, my name is Frank Stento. I submitted a letter earlier this month in support of the draft local labor policy, and I continue to advocate for that. I work with Painters and Allied Trades, DC number 4, and we represent industrial painters, commercial painters, drywall finishers, and glaziers here in Tompkins County. What I am hearing as those oppose the current proposed draft local labor policy is that it will not be profitable enough to attract development. That could not be further from the truth. What you are not hearing is the value of working with local building trades, contractors, and workforce. The quality of the work, along with the scheduling efficiency and professionalism, offset any potential to added costs. Our workforce invests in their own education. It takes 10,000 hours, roughly 5 years, to become a proficient in a skill. The skilled trades are no different, and we are self-funded, creating the next generation tasked to complete these construction projects. Why implement a local labor policy if it won't truly benefit those who live and spend their income within Tompkins County? For a developer and their general contractors to hire from out-of-state workforce based solely off low bid is directly taking the tax dollars from those who reside in Tompkins County and removing from the local economy. An out-of-state or region workforce has a much higher rate of being exploited from worker misclassification, wage theft, and labor trafficking. Do we want to encourage those unscrupulous contractors solely to maximize perceived profit for the developer? The proposed draft local labor policy discussed at last month's meeting will encourage those living in this affordable housing to apply for these middle-class blue-collar jobs. Each dollar earned by those who reside within this region has over a 70% return in the local economy. Ithaca is a well-sought region for development. Once these projects are completed, there is very little other than a few maintenance and administrative jobs left within the area. How does this foster the development of careers within our community? What is the true purpose of TCIDA? A watered-down version, as opposed to a strong local labor policy, will impact those seeking careers in construction. These labor-intensive construction careers often lead to additional opportunities within the industry. The original proposed labor policy would not lessen development within our region, nor would it limit profit to the developers. What it would do is create apprenticeship opportunities and pathways to self-dependency and careers for the marginalized in this region. This is something that we are passionate about, and we need buy-in from you to make this a reality. A strong middle class is what will drive our local economies in the years to come. A weak local labor policy will only further exacerbate the income inequality of those who live in Tompkins County. Respectfully submitted, Frank A. Stento.
And the final comment I have is from Kenneth Williams. Good morning, IDA members. My name is Kenneth Williams. I am the business manager for the Heat and Frost Insulators Local 30, Syracuse, New York. I realize why you may ask yourself, why is from the Syracuse area would have any input on an Ithaca labor policy? Well, it is because my territory covers from the Broome, Chemung, Tioga County borders of New York and Pennsylvania, all the way up to St. Lawrence County. We strive to educate our apprentices and members to be the best in our trade and our communities, wherever they should live in our jurisdictional territory. We as construction workers make a career of linking jobs together to support our families with good paying jobs that come with health benefits. These careers allow people to be productive citizens in their communities and pay their own way. I have been to council meetings in the city of Ithaca. I have heard the mayor speak on many occasions, and every message is the same. Let's push Ithaca into being a forward-thinking city. The message isn't always, let's support our local businesses by buying local. Support our city, our community. I ask this of the Ithaca community. If you are so structured around the Ithaca community and the people that live in it, why are you unwilling to employ them and invest in our greatest commodity? These projects that fall under 200/220 language, I believe that's the prevailing wage language in the state's regulations, are there to provide the working man or woman with a livable wage, with a pension, and with health benefits. This policy would be a trend-setting policy, a forward-thinking policy. It would send a message to the people that live in our community that the people who sit on these governing bodies, such as the IDA, to find value in the city's greatest commodity, its people. And if you are willing to build things using qualified local labor, which is what this policy is promoting, maybe in the future, you wouldn't find a need for affordable housing. That would truly be a united community. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Okay. So next on the agenda, I assume we have no additions. Ina, Heather?
Nope.
Okay, so we can proceed to business, and it is the IDA labor policy update discussion. And I see Martha, you have your hand up. I'm shocked. Why don't you go ahead?
Well, thank you, Rich. I'm just looking, it's already 11:20 and I'm looking at page 5 in our packet, which is the time outline. So we're already stuck. I don't know. I want to make sure we get to the fund balance discussion. So can we just, is there a way to manage this and sort of make sure we do both? That's my question.
Sure. Why don't we try to talk about specific pieces of the policy, if we could. Heather, you have a recommendation?
On page 5, there's an outline that we provided to sort of try and keep us on track. If we could, go through each of those items and, maybe they won't take as long as, we've allotted time for Or maybe we want to, create a hard stop time to talk about the fund balance after that.
Yeah, I looked at that outline. I'm afraid that's ambitious, but we can try it. What's the will of the IDA? Todd, did you have a comment?
I say,
On process?
it's a matter of time. I can go longer today, but I guess something I got a comment I'd like to make when you're ready.
Well, let's talk about process first. How do we want to run through our discussion? Do we want to follow this outline? Or do we want to talk about specific aspects of the policy?
This outline does talk about specific aspects of the policy, and I think that it's probably, the whole point of this meeting is to try to get us through the details of what would go in here so that we can hopefully pass something and actually get a policy in place.
The outline
I
is
think it's a
based
good
on the
outline.
comments that the IDA members provided. So, these are the substantive things that there were comments.
Okay, let's go
provided
to prevailing wage. So if you have comments about prevailing wage.
Rich, can I just ask, this is booked for a 2-hour meeting, right?
Yeah,
That's my understanding, yeah.
Okay, so we may not need like a full hour on the fund balance policy, but I do want to make sure we get to it at some point.
We'll
Thanks.
try. We will try. Okay, Todd, why don't you go?
Okay, so I just want to stick with this outline right now, or read my.
Yeah. Yes.
See, so when they talked about the MWB exemptions, the waiver, I don't know if it was John or somebody brought out some good points there. I think Heather mentioned something, or Meredith, about the percentages. These percentages that the state is trying to get, they just don't happen. They don't meet them. We don't have those kinds of numbers for MWB contractors and such in this area. I mean, there's just those numbers relate more to like a big city like New York City. They don't relate to upstate New York, where those numbers just don't exist. So that's why a lot of that looks like and one of the comments made was, if we have prevailing wage and these new requirements by the state, how would it would hinder trying to do that. Those numbers are unrealistic anyways. There's no way no one's ever gonna hit those numbers in upstate New York. And that's been proven just with the PLAs that have been done and other projects that have been done with this state money. It's been proven over and over. It just doesn't
we
work.
did it.
What's that?
We did it. I hit
What
the numbers
job?
on our project.
What job was that, John?
30% of our project was done by a woman-owned business.
One business?
You're talking about Press Bay Alley?
No, I'm talking about the Ithaca Journal building, so the 100s West project.
Yeah, but when you get bigger projects, this doesn't happen because they don't have.
Yeah,
that-
no, I agree with that.
They don't have the backing to get that funding, to get the.
Right.
But
I mean, there are some big, there's a big electrical sub out of Syracuse that's a woman-owned business. So there are some out of area, and when you're looking at a project that might be done by like an INHS or somebody like that, where they do have these WMB requirements, they may have to pull from other markets in order to meet them, and that specific requirement is prioritized by the state grant fund. So this is another area where we risk potentially, if we don't grant an exemption for WMB contractors, then we risk jeopardizing the completion of the project at all, because there's essentially an entity giving a much larger amount of funding than we are that's making this project happen. And they're saying these are the requirements. And so if our requirements are in conflict with that, I think we have to defer to the federal government there.
Yeah.
All right, Martha?
Yeah, I guess I would love to start with, what are the laws that for prevailing wage and MWB, and what projects do they apply to?
So I can answer that. There's new prevailing wage legislation at the state. And that's supposed to go into effect in January. There's a lot of holes in it. There's a lot of unanswered questions. But basically, we've put in this policy the language from the prevailing wage requirement. The covered projects are defined as construction work done under contract, which is paid for in whole or in part out of public funds. And the IDA incentives are considered public funds. where the amount of all such public funds, when aggregated, is at least 30% of the total construction project costs, and where project costs are over 5 million. So there may be cases where there will be projects that the IDA is delivering incentives to that are also receiving other kinds of state incentives that may hit some of these benchmarks. They will be required to comply with the state's prevailing wage laws. So
that sounds
that's one. And then any project that receives state funds, whether it be NYSERDA funding, HFC funding, which is housing finance for affordable housing projects, an ESD grant incentive, a tax incentive from ESD, those projects are required to hit a certain percentage of minority women business enterprise, veteran business enterprise requirements. It's usually a combined 30%. It's in the contract of the incentives that comes from the state. They are required. The state is not providing waivers. They have not been providing waivers for years. So what happens with those projects that receive state monies is they need to pull from a larger pool. I think one of the things that we provided in the comments was from Lynn Truaim at INHS, that she had actually pulled from a database the number of MWBE contractors, and it's very small in Tompkins. Todd knows this, it's not a secret, we all know this. So for those projects to receive the state funds, they're pulling from a wider area. It may be Syracuse, it may be Rochester, it may be Binghamton. So that's where that comes into play. We simply in the policy just provided the prevailing wage legislation as the definition just to make folks aware. But I do recognize that for any project that has to comply with that or is receiving an ESD incentive that has to meet the MWBE and the veteran requirements, it sort of conflicts with the local construction labor policy. And so I would not be opposed to adding language in the waivers. In the policy, it says what we will provide waivers for. We could simply add, we will provide waivers if there's a state incentive that requires, some MWBE and veteran, business requirement that you can demonstrate you cannot meet locally.
Okay, let me jump in then. If comments could be directed to that issue. Do we want to add some language in the waiver policy? John?
If I can follow up.
Yeah, so I think
I think that's at a minimum. We can't have something that conflicts directly. And if
Yeah.
I would love to see both and. I would love to see local labor be more minority, women-owned, and disabled vets. So maybe the labor movement can work on that too. We need both
Okay,
ends.
but your answer is yes. John?
Yeah, so I would like to propose that we actually just kind of move on from the prevailing wage issue, because this statement in here is just a simple statement of fact that identifies what the state law
So you
is.
say yes as
And I don't
well.
think it's substantive to the policy, and I think we should spend our time on waivers and penalty in the
Yeah,
other sections.
I agree, but you're saying yes. Mike?
I actually, I was going to say something along the lines of what John said, and I just wanted to ask too, maybe we can kind of treat this as a checklist so that hopefully we can get through the whole thing and get something passed today. That would be awesome. So,
Okay, Todd?
the wage check,
right.
Just the other thing I would think about with the WM, I'm bad with these acronyms, I'm sorry, the WM.
MWBE.
And all the different, Kevin, thank you, Heather. They could be the owners, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't mean that the whole workforce has to come from where they're from, they can get people locally, whether it's non-union or union, they can get people locally to work the projects. That's the one thing I would like, if we do something like that, have, maybe carve some language in there. So, okay, it's fine if you're out of the area, but at least hire people locally that live and reside here.
Okay. Ann?
I'm good with the MWBE exemption as part of the waiver process, because as someone said, that just as this labor policy. I'm
Okay,
hoping-
let me interrupt, and we're just crushed for time. You agree? It seems like we have consensus here. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Sorry, let's move on to waivers. I think we're going to have more discussion there, and it does seem to be where we may not see such agreement. It's good to recognize where we do agree, I guess. Anyway, Todd, are you up on a
Oh,
comment
sorry.
on waivers?
Oh, sorry about that. I forgot to throw my hand up.
Okay, and do you want to talk about the authority issue on waivers?
The authority issue, I don't, I'm trying to see if we have, we don't have as far as the conflict of interest. You want to go down then 1, 2, 3?
Yeah,
I do like the idea of keeping the authority with the waivers with the Labor Committee, because they, as we discussed in the Labor Committee, they can be, we're hoping they can be we can be flexible and meet, within a week or two, so it doesn't slow down projects. So that's on number 1. Did you want me to keep going?
no, let's get comment on that. Let's go
Okay.
1-1 here. Jeff?
Yeah, so I would hope that, Kurt, could you just quickly address, the list that you had provided on PDF page 8, which listed all the IDAs and who's doing what in terms of their policies. Do we have any sense as to what the waiver policy is for these other IDAs that they're doing?
Yep. So the chart that you're referencing, yep, is directly addressing your question for what are the other IDAs doing. I also provided some employment figures. There's overlap between those employed in and, place of work and place of residence. I am not aware of the waiver policies for these IDAs offhand.
I can answer that. I've read most of the policies, and the majority of them do have waivers for exactly the language that we've provided about waivers for, what's in our policy. If there's warranty issues, lack of local significant cost differential. I haven't seen one that has defined a significant cost differential, but it's a pretty standard list of what the waivers are for.
Okay,
And most of that was pulled from Broome County, from their waiver. Although I will just say anecdotally, in speaking to the heads of these other IDAs, and I won't name names, but they really don't check local labor percentages. And even if they get waivers, I'm sure it's just, I would feel confident that's a blanket stamp of approval.
okay, Jeff, do you have more?
No, I just wanted to understand what other people were doing at this point.
Okay, Martha?
Yeah, in committee, Heather said that there's really no enforcement of these. These are requirements on paper only, it seems. So I don't think any of us wants to do that. I have some concerns about the Labor Committee actually being the reviewer of waivers. I like the idea somebody said about trying to make at least some of these waivers very crystal clear and able to be administered by staff. But there may be other murkier issues. So maybe the executive committee, the IDA, which would, I think, have broader sort of authority than a subcommittee of the IDA.
Okay, John?
Yeah, I think I raised this question in the first place, and I don't see any reason why a committee needs to meet in order to determine if certain facts are the case, right? So if we've got a good list of like, these are the factors, and if this is true, you get a waiver, staff should be able to review the waiver application and say, oh yes, you actually did your bidding. You have determined that there aren't available contractors in that trade locally. Therefore, your waiver is granted. And that should be a simple pro forma review that just makes sure that they actually met the policy. I would suggest that perhaps, we could put in an open-ended, if there's some other reason that you need a waiver, you can come before IDA to ask for it. I would suggest that in that case, if it's something that falls off the end of our list, but, we haven't been able to anticipate, I would think that that should go to the full board of the IDA. But those things should be incredibly rare if they ever happen at all. With the right list, staff should be able to review this. We shouldn't need to convene a committee and, ask the developers
Okay.
to take the risk that it would be an arbitrary rejection.
All right, Todd?
I like what John said there too, and but I like this. Either it's the local committee because they're the ones more into it, or you bring it back to the whole board, like Martha said, and the whole board votes out. Hopefully you can get the whole board there. If not, at least you get a majority of it there.
I said the executive committee.
Oh, executive committee, okay.
Yeah.
I'd rather see it go to the full board then instead of, if it's not just a local committee, I'd like to see the full board. Just that way everybody we all got some skin in this, and we should all have a say in it too.
Yeah, Laura?
Thanks. I agree with a number of the points that have been made already. John's point and others, that there should be some consistency and clarity on the list of the criteria that would qualify for a waiver. I am very concerned about the affordable housing, impact on affordable housing, and especially with the delay that is built into this draft proposal. It could be as much as a 90-day delay, and that could really jeopardize some affordable housing projects. And I did want to respond to one of the commenters earlier. Affordable housing would provide housing for some of the local labor, but not all of the local labor workers. I think the point that I've heard in other meetings is that many local labor workers would in fact be receiving very strong wages, which is what we want to see, and would, as a result, perhaps not qualify for affordable housing themselves. But I am very concerned with the negative impact on affordable housing projects.
Well, let's get to that. Let's stay on waivers and how we want to construct the request for a waiver.
Well, my point is that I would like affordable housing projects to be automatic waivers.
Okay.
The exemption we're going to get to, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about that exemption in 3A, second A. Anyway, yes, I agree we need to get there. I've got Kurt, Todd, and Heather. Kurt?
Yeah, well, if Heather's authorized me to participate, again, I'm not a member of the IDA, but retroactively, we're talking about these blanket waivers for MWBE and veteran-owned businesses. What better reason to create a pipeline or a feeder system for those things instead of talking about these blanket exemptions? Though for now would be fine, but that's part of this labor policy, is to create those types of enterprises. But to my point, I'm comfortable with what John referenced earlier, having a staff waiver. It does expedite the process. And I will say the last sentence of the waiver paragraph as it stands is that now it says the labor committee, but it could be IDA staff provides a monthly report of all recent waiver requests at each regular meeting of the IDA. So you all can review what has been requested, and then we can discuss what these larger issues that might need to, the cream that rises that needs more discussion is all.
Okay, Todd?
I think that was great what Kurt just said there. I agree completely. And the part about I think what Laura mentioned about the affordable housing, about people getting the higher wages. I think what some people are trying to point out is it's a path for people to get into the trades. And when you get in, you're making lower wages as an apprentice, and then you earn as you learn. You better yourself, and then you keep bettering yourself. I think that was what they were trying to get a point to.
Okay. Heather, and then I'm going to make a comment.
Okay, so in terms of the waivers, I am happy to have staff administratively approve waiver requests. For those that are listed clearly on page 3 of your packet, at the very top, it says they will be approved where there's documented lack of workers, warranty issues, need for specialized skills, cost differentials of 20% or more. If there's a list, that's administrative and I'm happy to do it. And if we're doing it administratively and we're presenting it to the IDA board, the IDA board gets to overrule, because, you know, that's going to create problems for contractors down the road. Where I have a problem is the other category. There's other extenuating circumstances. That is not an administrative approval, and that would need to go to the board or a committee of the board. I've had a brief conversation with Russ Genzel about this, and you know, the reason that we did a committee was because the committee could meet quicker and give quicker response times for those subcontractors that would be asking for waivers. However, the Labor Committee is a committee of the IDA that has non-IDA members on the committee. It would be better to give that, and it's an ad hoc committee, so it would be better to give that authority to a standing committee of the IDA. We have two standing committees that are required by statute: the Finance and Audit Committee and the Governance Committee, made up of 3 members of the IDA. I think that in terms of timing and being able to give quick responses, it would be easier to have a committee of the board making those decisions for other.
Okay, I'm going to jump in, and I think the comments have been good in terms of identifying this issue of we need to have appropriate governance. If the IDA is giving an incentive and the waiver process could alter it, we need to have IDA responsibility for those secondary decisions. So it either has to be the full IDA or one of the committees. And I would go with either governance or the audit and finance, or the full IDA. I'm fine with that, but I do think that the responsibility has to remain with the IDA. And I'm also concerned about the administrative burden. We don't know how this is going to work yet, and the number of waiver requests that may come in. I think we as the IDA, if we're going to give authority to the staff to do it, we need to make sure we don't overwhelm them and that we give them very clear guidance so that it's clear when something comes into this other extenuating circumstances category that needs us to be involved. And I see John and then Todd.
Yeah, I agree. I really think that the review, so I think that Heather is exactly spot on. We should have a really clear list. I think that that's our point 3 here. Let's get that done today and make sure that that's crystal clear. And then I think for the other extenuating circumstances, I absolutely would not put that on staff. And I think that I don't think we should put it on a subcommittee either. I think that it should be the full IDA. This should be exceedingly rare. You know, most circumstances should be covered by clearly documented exemptions. If we have a problem with it, we can always amend our policy if we didn't think of something now that we need to add to it. And I think that there are voices on this committee that aren't going to be, I mean, the governance committee is a small group. I would love to hear from, you know, from Todd and Ann and, you know, everybody, you know, if something comes up so that we, you know, we really are all aware and, you know, can consider the policy implications, you know, if something does come up.
Okay, Todd.
Yeah, I just commend everybody. I think there's real good discussion here on this, and I think it's everybody has some real good points on this. I'd be in favor of the whole board myself too. If it's not just a local labor board, I'd be, you know, I'd definitely be in favor of the whole board, I think.
Okay, Martha.
We have different either practices or requirements with respect to public meetings between committees and the full IDA. Am I right? I mean, we get minutes of committee meetings, but I think they're not public in the same way. Is that right? Russ or Heather? Are committee meetings open to the public?
Yes.
And the minutes are on the website, aren't they?
Yeah, a committee of the full board is considered a public body and is subject to the same rules.
Okay. the Labor Committee has been meeting as an ad hoc committee, and that has or has not been public?
I don't know the answer to that question personally.
Okay, so all right, so there's no difference then on that parameter. Thanks.
Okay, Russ?
No, I'll be brief because I know you guys have a lot to talk about. And I know it varies from IDA to IDA relative to what the labor policy is. And once you figure out what you want to do, one thing that has worked very well in Monroe County and Orange County is they have a monitor that Loki Brill that monitors the local labor. There's a fee associated with that that's passed on to the applicant, but they deal with the administrative burden of making sure that every recipient of IDA benefits is in compliance with whatever policy this board decides to come up with. And it takes, like I said, the administrative burden off Ina and Heather and this board, and just food for thought. And they're very reasonable, actually, from a cost perspective.
Russ, you're looking at Loki Brill right here.
Oh.
I serve at Heather's pleasure, but I enjoy doing it, and that's what I do.
I mean, in fact, I digress, but in fact, in Monroe County, what Comida does is they have a sign in front of each project that says this project is subject to local labor. And the Loki Brill crew team monitors it and again takes the administrative burden off of the board and staff. And like I said, they're very reasonably priced. Frankly.
Okay, well, something to investigate. Yeah, thanks. Jeff?
Yeah, I would support Heather's recommendations in terms of staff granting waivers, obviously based on certain exemptions. I think my only concern with that other category is in number 2, when we talk about the timing, I had a lot of concern about 30 days with these projects. So I would certainly want us to shorten that time to 15 days. And if that other category falls within the whole IDA has to get together and do that, can we actually achieve that? Would be one of my concerns if we did it with the whole IDA as opposed to one of the subcommittees that were already talked about.
Okay. Ann?
And listening to the discussion, I now am in favor of how it was described as far as the staff, detailing it out, the waivers, and having staff review them and approve them, and trying to then figure out how you would do something, the other category. So I'm with the group on that.
Okay, and it seems like the consensus or most of the voices were that if we get to the other extenuating circumstances category, the preference would be for the whole IDA. And that really moves us forward to that question of how fast could we meet and make those decisions. I think we would have to be accepting of having some special meetings to make sure we get at those issues. But love to hear a comment on that. John?
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that should be exceedingly rare. I think the local labor committee has done a pretty good job of outlining most of them. We've got a few other things that we're going to add to it, specifically WMB and/or affordable housing exemptions, which we'll discuss later. And this isn't going to happen a lot. This is the catch-all for something we just haven't thought of. We ought to be able to schedule a special meeting or leave it to our next meeting. And I trust our staff to do a good job of deciding whether or not we need to try to call a special meeting because this project is on a time crunch with this specific answer, or maybe it's further down the road for this project and it can wait till the next meeting. I think our staff are going to be in touch with the developers. They're going to know where they're at, and they're going to know whether how time critical it is, and they'll get it in front of us if we need to meet.
Okay, Martha.
Yeah, I think people need to be prepared to be nimble, to meet at 8 in the morning or 6 at night. And the idea needs to be prepared to move with a simple quorum. And if you have 4 members on a quorum, do you need to pass an action? Do you need a majority of who's present, or do you need 4 people to approve something regardless of how many who are present.
I
Do
have
we
to go
know
look
that?
at the bylaws. I don't know.
Okay, so people
Yeah,
need,
I'll have to look at that too as well, Martha, but typically it's a majority of present. But I have to look at that as well, because I don't know the answer to your question off the top of my head.
I think that we should make sure we know that. I think it should be at least 4, should be the same number as to take action with a full board. All right, thank you.
Laura, did you
Agreed.
have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. I had my hand up, but I think John summarized exactly what I was thinking. The other extenuating circumstances will be rare. If need be, we can call a special meeting as we're doing today. So I agree with the points that John has made. That's why I took my hand down.
All right, is there consensus on that as the way through on this question of achieving waivers?
And if I may add, perhaps I change the language, so instead of within 30 days, say no longer than 30 days, and then we can be nimble in that way.
Is that acceptable to everybody? John?
What happens if something comes up, it's longer than 30 days, does that grant the waiver if we're unable to meet? I mean, it seems like what we're saying in that policy is like, we'll do it within 30 days. If the board can't meet, the waiver should be granted.
Now, John, we can come up with language, Kurt and I can come up with language that wouldn't automatically create a waiver if the 30-day period expires before the committee can meet or the board can meet. So it's not, I let the lawyers and I can work with Kurt on that to make sure that that's not an automatic exemption if you're not meeting within 30 days.
Russ, I would actually argue that it should be an automatic exemption. If we meet monthly anyway, and that was the question I was asking, is what is our policy here? I understand, you'll craft the language, but I would argue, like, if this group cannot develop a quorum within 30 days, we shouldn't stop a project for it.
Yeah.
That's on us to be able to get together.
Let's hear a comment on that point of what is the default if we don't get our acts together and meet.
I think if we cannot meet to review an application, the
Right.
waiver should be granted.
Yeah, no, I'd like to hear from other members on that point. So Martha, what do you think?
Yeah, that would prevent somebody trying to stonewall and delay and therefore obstruct the waiver. So I think the default should be if the IDA can't meet, then they get the waiver.
Okay, Jeff?
I would agree with that.
All right.
Same for me.
Okay, I think I agree. Mike, you're okay? Okay, Todd? Yeah, all right. Well, so that gets us through to exemptions.
What about the conflict of interest?
Oh,
I
oh,
think
yeah,
there
we
was a
went by that.
question posed.
That was, yeah, Heather, that was, I believe Jeff Gorski brought that up, and it was in relation to having a labor seat on the deciding committee to make that vote. But I think since it got moved to the IDA, I wouldn't even worry about it.
Thanks.
Right. We're solving problems. It's good.
One quick joke I could see another way to get around this automatic waiver is the 4 of you flee to adjacent states like Texas legislators. Becomes a fun political game.
Yeah, Texas and Wisconsin, right?
I'll
Let's
help
see.
get the jet on standby.
Yeah. So exemptions are 3A. We're trying to list what the direction is to staff on granting exemptions. No bidders, no local labor, specialized services. Are those acceptable to everybody? Are there others? Questions, comments? Todd?
The one thing I like to watch out, because this is my experience with general contractors and developers, they'll tell you they don't have bidders. They have no, we've asked, we don't have no local bidders. But what happens is the local contractors or the contractors know a certain developer's reputation or GC's reputation. They know I'm gonna have to fight like hell just to get paid accordingly like I'm supposed to in sequential payments. And that's why a lot of them will steer away from certain developers. They know they're coming in town, they know what they do, they bring in the same people, and they don't want to waste the time and money and their resources in bidding a job. some of them are pretty substantial when you got to put the time together to bid these jobs. And if that's want to make sure that they show really prove to us that they've acquired local people to pay. I don't know, maybe that's something we could, maybe do we put something in the policy where, you know, I don't know if it's something we add to the policy later. Do we add something in there later where the GC or the developers got to pay their subs within a certain amount of time? Or things could be held back on them, like incremental stages there too. And that's something maybe think about adding later, but.
Yeah, we certainly want everybody to act in good faith, but this is a complicated issue. Let's get some comment on it. Martha?
Yeah, I think we better not put anything in that we aren't prepared to enforce, because then that sort of undermines the legitimacy of the whole enterprise. I feel badly about that situation, obviously, but I think that's beyond what the IDA has the, authority and certainly the bandwidth to enforce. I would say that if the local contractors start to get a sense that, in fact, GCs are being required and pushed to hire the local contractors, then there may be more. It's an iterative thing. I hope we're creating an ecosystem that's more friendly to those folks actually getting the jobs. So I think it'll be important for the labor community to say, no, really, please put in your bids. And I'd like to just let that.
But I think Todd's concern is a little bit different, that you could have developers that don't act in good faith and develop a reputation for stringing along their contractors and not paying them timely, which kills them, right? Is really, really painful. Should we be doing something to address that? And
well, I understand that. I would like to see documented cases of that come to the IDA as sort of a complaint process, perhaps. But we need documentation. We just can't we have stories about this. So that'd be something the IDA could consider on a case-by-case basis, I would say.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, I don't know if this should be introduced as a 3A, but the one thing I picked up was timing. So that was in Mark Newman's letter, where I think City Center or something like that. Some of the local stuff was concerned about timing, and I don't know if that's a waiver that should be part of the staff or that falls into the other bucket. But that would be an area that I would certainly want us to think about is, where would timing, if we've got a large Cornell project and there's a lot of local labor tied up in this, and we got another developer trying to do something, and then his timing is pushed back because local labor is tied up, I feel like that should be some type of exemption. And I don't know if it would fall into an automatic or an other category, but I'd like us to consider that.
Okay, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the issue that Todd raises is an important one, and I think that it's outside the scope of this policy. I would encourage us to consider a policy under which, documented bad actors, folks who don't pay their contractors can't qualify for future incentives, and consider clawing back existing incentives if they don't pay their contractors, if that's not already something we can do in our policy. But I think it's outside the scope of this particular issue, and I hope that we can get through this and actually get this policy adopted today and not get bogged down in that particular detail. But I do think we should follow up on it and come back to it, because I think it's really important. You can put a small contractor out of business, and that shouldn't happen. Not where our dollars involved.
Okay.
I think that the timing question is an important one, and in my mind, that actually falls under a lack of available labor. And I would guess, and I don't know if there are any other voices in the room that have knowledge here, but typically, like when we release a bid spec, we specify that the contractors have to perform it on a specific timeline in our bid. And so, basically, if you're responding to that bid, you're going to be, responding that you're available to actually do the work on our timeline. I don't know if that's the case with larger projects. I mean, we're small, so things are a little different for us. But I would say that if there are no contractors available to do the job within the construction timeline of the project, that's the same as there are no contractors available to do the job, in my mind. And maybe we want to get specific about that.
All right, Todd?
Yeah, and just kind of Jeff brought it up and had some good comments there too. And then, but the one thing with Mark Newman, when he's talking about ability to use local labor is based on industry relationships and budget and time considerations. When they're talking about there was no access to local labor, all they're talking about is just what I mentioned earlier. They have their connections already. They know they want to bring in people from out of town. I was lucky. One of my contractors was on the city center job, but there was only one for all the 13 trades. There's only one trade that had that and definitely employed local people. The carpenters had a mix. You know, I saw the numbers there. They had a mixed group of local and out of local area. But those are huge factors. You know, if people know their reputation is bad like that, they won't bid the jobs, and that's why you're not seeing the numbers.
Okay, Kurt?
Yep. Number 2 of the local labor policy as it's written, proof of local bids. So in addition to, if a waiver was granted for lack of local workers, we'd be able to cross-reference that with the bid list that they submitted. And again, I fall back to the last sentence of the waiver paragraph, which says we report all this to the full IDA board monthly. So I think collectively we'd be able to ferret out the bad actors pretty quickly.
Okay. Todd, did you have more?
Yes, usually with that we're at the differential now. The cost, is that where we are now, the cost differential?
Well, I think we're still on this question of timing and other exemptions. What are the definitions? Are we satisfied with that? Do we want to do something specific to add timing in? Or is that subsumed by no local labor available? What's the sense of the IDA? Martha?
I think it's already covered by no local labor available.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Martha, what do you think?
Yeah, I might want to add a clause that says no local labor available, including because of time constraints for a project, something like that.
Do we want to have that handled administratively? Or would
Yeah.
that kick up to the whole IDA?
Yeah, I mean,
No,
I
that-
think stuff has to be documented and they need, they can document to staff as well as, and we have to trust our staff. So,
Okay, I heard somebody else talking. Was that you, John?
Yeah, I was just saying, yes, that should be done. That should be handled absolutely by the staff level.
Okay. Ann?
I think it's covered under no local bidders. If we start to get in here about timing, then we'd have to put parameters in there on what does the timing, what does that actually mean? And we're getting in here to putting in a lot of minutia that other IDAs have not put in. So
Okay.
I wouldn't be in favor of putting in timing.
Okay. Todd, and then I'd like to make a comment. Go ahead, Todd.
Thank you. I guess this question would be for Russ. Russ, can the IDA put in stipulations there to just in this, like especially for this one, when they say that no bidders are available? Is there a way we could put something in there where because of stuff like that we could require them to pay their subs within X amount of time? Is there a way we could structure something like that? Not necessarily now, but down the road.
Yeah, so Todd, remember there's no statutory requirement that any IDA have a local labor policy. Most IDAs are doing what you guys are doing, which is establishing one. So you can have whatever you want within that policy, and if they don't comply with it and don't receive the waivers that are approved by the committee or the board, they would be in default of their benefits and the documents would be terminated and there would be a recapture. So yes, we can put some teeth into the documents to make sure that they are in compliance with the policy, whatever it ultimately becomes.
Thank you, Russ. I mean, I would definitely like something like that just to keep, I just know just from my experience alone, just how people do that. And then the developers are using that comment about not finding bidders. Same thing just happened down to the Cuba Carpenter Park there at the Marco. They said he couldn't find local bidders. But I'm talking to some big contractors And the first thing they do is they reach out to Rochester area and they say, hey, what can you tell us about them? And they all tell them, stay away. You're gonna struggle getting paid, and not picking on them. That's just what happens. Contractors call around, they find out the person's reputation, and then they get nervous and they don't want to. It's a huge commitment for them to invest in estimating a job, and they're gonna lose that right out of the. If they don't have a chance of getting it, they instantly lost it.
Okay.
They try to prioritize how they're gonna spend the money the best way they can, where they got the best potential.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in with a comment. I think we subsume the timing question within the question of no local bidders. We treat it administratively, and we get our policy up and running, and we see if it's something where we need to do a tweak later on, would be my view. Martha?
My question is what is the language we're looking at? I'm looking at the draft policy right now. Where are we talking about the language?
I think it's in the
PDF
beginning
page
of
5.
waiver.
What?
Top of PDF page 5. It says waiver.
Oh, I have page 3.
Yeah,
I'm
on page 3, the first paragraph of waiver, where it says warranty issues, documented lack of workers, need for specialized skills, cost differentials.
So is the consensus to add any language to documented lack of workers or not?
I think we just recognize now that timing is one of the issues that could lead to lack of local workers. They could be here, but otherwise engaged. Heather?
So-
I'm not real comfortable with that being an administrative thing because it's not just rote, it's not cut and dried. I think if the timing were an issue, that would have to fall under other. I know there are really valid timing issues because time is money when you're doing construction. A good example I have is when we issued the bonds for Kendall for their $30 million expansion. They needed to have the framing done within 6 to 8 weeks. The one local firm that bid on it said, I only have this many guys. It will take us 4 to 5 months to do it. And so they hired someone, that's all they do. They come in and do framing. They came in, they did it in 5 weeks. They were done. It kept the project on schedule. With City Center, I know there was some timing issues. And again, it was a contractor saying, well, I don't have the capacity to do it in this time frame. It's going to take me twice as long. And that, held up other things. So they chose not to use that contractor. I think there's too much subjectivity there that I would not be comfortable just administratively approving the timing issue.
Okay. Martha?
So I guess that maybe what we need is to see another draft, revised draft, red line draft, so we can see if these issues are truly covered in the language. Because I'm also looking at the only thing that doesn't say anything in that paragraph about bids. It says lack of workers, but it doesn't say anything about bids. And the only thing about bids.
I think it should actually say lack of subcontractors.
All right,
The top of page 3.
Yeah.
we can noodle on language. We're
Okay.
leaving timing out. Is that correct? And I
Sounds
can
like
provide
it.
a red line copy for everybody.
Sounds like it. John?
Okay,
I
thanks.
mean, I guess I'm not sure, like, it seems to me that the developer should be able to document. I mean, the case with Longview, it seems very clear. It's like their funding required that it should be done by a certain date, and the contractors weren't actually able to do that. I think that there's, if the staff member reviewing this does not feel comfortable with the justification that's provided by the contractor, by the developer, then that would fall under other, right? The whole point of the staff review is that they're trying to say, is this obvious, right? And if the answer is no, then that would fall under other extenuating circumstances.
Any comment on that?
So I would make that waiver documented lack of bidders, because we're receiving bid documents. We can clearly see there's no, I think that's the better noodle on the language.
Do we want to say qualified bids? so that there would be some room for an administrative determination that the timing just is completely off. If it's close, it should go to the whole IDA. But then what's close? I don't know.
Well, you could say that the bidder that said I could do it within 6 to 8 months and they needed 4 to 6 weeks, that was a bidder, but pointing out qualified allows the waiver to be approved.
Administratively. Are we comfortable
Right.
with that?
Right, I would think the qualified probably important.
I mean, in my mind, qualified means that this contractor is capable of performing this scope, right? It's like, I am qualified to do this work. It doesn't necessarily mean I can do it when you need it.
I was using qualified to include the word available, but maybe we should say qualified and available.
Or qualified with the time constraints involved, or?
I mean, yeah, I think we should just put a point in there of like able to meet the time constraints of the project. I think that that's obvious enough. And if it is questionable, then the staff can say this is questionable. I want it to go to the board.
Okay.
Like
Are we
qualified.
comfortable with that language? And
What
and
language?
able to meet the time constraints of the project. Does that do it?
Mhm.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, it looks like we have consensus there. Great. Let's move on to cost differential. And the current proposal is 20%. There's a proposed alternate of 5%. Jeff?
So this is where I'd ask Kurt, do we have any sense as to what other IDAs do in this area?
Not offhand.
I haven't seen a policy that defines significant cost differential.
I take that back. It was Westchester County. I think it's Westchester or Orange, Westchester, where they had a 20% or 10%, one of those. But the ones in our area do not have that requirement
They just say significant.
as significant, correct?
Yeah, that
No,
doesn't
John,
give
to
you
answer
much
your question,
guidance.
if there's a cost, the policies that our firm has seen, and obviously as Kirk notes, it's location dependent. They do have a percentage of cost differential as a criteria.
Okay, Todd?
I think the one thing that I don't know how you'd formulate something like this. Maybe Jeff could understand this. I don't know how you formulate this into something where because depending on where the workforce is coming from, their county taxes might be a lot less than ours, or ours might be more. Is there a way to track that as far as to help out with this price difference?
I don't know.
If they're paying their wages less because the taxes are less there, and then when they come here, is there a way to gauge that, or?
Kurt?
You mean like their real property taxes there?
Well, like the bidding the project based on the workforce they have, where they come from. And if it's cheaper for them to pay somebody a living wage in that county compared to coming here to Tompkins County, I mean, that's a cost differential we're really not seeing. And we just see the bottom number here showing the difference. Oh, wow, this guy's 15% more. But we gotta go with this other one instead.
Right. It's like housing in these other communities
it's
is
just
5% of what it costs here, and whatever. It's like, right. I understand.
Gives a more realistic number of our area compared to these other areas.
I don't know how we review that. I mean, you try to get staff to review that administratively, and it's like, so now Kurt's looking up the living wage in 500 different counties across the United States.
Yeah. Okay, Martha.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're not disputing the idea that our contiguous counties are local labor, correct? So
That's right.
Cortland, Schuyler, Cayuga. I think you go across Tompkins County, and in fact, you can go across school district lines and you change the housing prices. So you go across Tompkins County lines and you've changed the housing prices, but you're still considered local labor if you're in Cortland, even if the housing costs are vastly different. I don't think if something needs that level of of analysis. I don't think it works. I think, and I frankly, I think 20%, I didn't argue with it in the labor committee, but it seems like a really big number. I mean, that can be millions of dollars. And I have a question as to whether the distinction between local versus non-local, the impact on our economy is really worth that much. And that's been the argument that labor has made, which I support, but 20% seems like too high, frankly.
John,
Do we have any data on what as a percentage of project costs, what the value of our incentives usually are? I mean, I know we always get the report that says, here's the project cost and here's the value of the incentives, but I don't know if we track what that percentage typically looks like. Is that something that we know?
They usually are around 8 to 12%, usually around 10% of project
Right.
costs.
And then what about so the other costs that the developer has to bear in terms of like our administrative costs, our legal fees, et cetera, that erodes that 8 to 12% some, right? So, I mean, they're really probably getting more like, 3 to 5, maybe 7% of actual net benefit to the project. And I think that's kind of where I was coming from when I suggested 5%. It's like, if you go much higher than that, then, they're not actually getting an incentive from us. At which point now we no longer have the control to have this policy apply at all. So we're not getting any local labor requirement. And also we lose our affordable housing and sort of other policies that we might enact over time.
okay, Todd.
The developer could still do these projects, just if they want these subsidies, they gotta meet this parameter of these requirements of local labor. I know the other ones I've seen had 10%, and I think that's what the committee first was looking at, was a 10% proposal. And we went with the 20. Maybe we just go back down to split it and go back to 15. I'm just a suggestion.
Okay. Martha, I have Martha, and then I was going to make a comment. Go ahead, Martha.
I'm looking at Jeff's questions, page 7. How was the 20% decided? It seems too steep. Some have suggested that will push them not to obtain IDA incentives. To be clear, I don't care if they never come to the IDA. I care if they build the project. Because if they don't build the project, there's no labor, or anything, or any other benefits. So to the extent that, we always ask applicants, there's a line, would this project happen if you didn't get the incentives? Everybody writes no. Is that actually correct? How are we going to decide that? But so the question is, if they didn't get IDA incentives, would they build the project? Would they build it somewhere else? For example, the whole CTAP program is about building in the downtown core for all sorts of important planning and economic development and sustainability reasons. They might build, the Tompkins Trust Company might have put their headquarters in another town, which is what we were pretty sure that was a risk. And that was one big argument for granting those abatements. So I don't want this policy to either push projects into not happening at all or push density projects into the suburbs. So that's my concern here. If they're going to build it in the same location without the IDA, that doesn't bother me. That's fine. Although, of course, then we lose any leverage about local labor at all. But so there's a risk benefit here. And I think 10% might be a better way to split the baby. Whatever.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. I don't know what the right percentage is, but I'm also concerned that if it's a small piece of the larger project, 20% might be fine, and it doesn't create a huge economic impact for the developer. So they eat it, and that's great. But if it's their largest subcontract and 20% vastly changes the financial structure of the deal, that's where we risk killing the project. And what John indicated about eating up our incentive, just taking it back through this provision, it seems like we should also have some gauge to tie to overall project costs, not just the specific bid. That if it's, say, more than 20% of the specific bid or some percentage of total project cost, it becomes problematic. But there, Todd, you're up.
Yeah, I agree with what you said there too, Rich, with that, maybe put some thresholds on there, above a certain amount of money. That would affect the larger jobs, and it wouldn't hinder some of these smaller jobs. But John, I'm sure John probably knows his experience too, where when you before a developer invests money into a project, they do a lot of research, groundwork, and they got a lot of money invested into already. They know what their burden price is and unburdened price is. They know what they can afford, and they know what the limits are, and so they know that beforehand. As far as I know, I've never heard of a contractor bidding a job knowing that the only way I'm going to get this is I need to get IDA help with the IDA committees. That's a bonus for them, and we should be looking at it. I personally think with the IDA, we should be looking at it as creating jobs. Is this how many jobs is this going to create instead of a developer or a GC, getting more money in their pockets? How is this going to affect the jobs that are going to be here after this project's done? So the only thing we can do with this construction part of it, we're just looking out for the temporary construction jobs that are going on during this project. And then the job's done, that's over. But these subsidies are going to last a long time to these developers. That's the way I like looking at it myself. It makes more sense to me.
All right, John?
If that was true, we should stop right now. I guess I'll say, the core premise of this, the whole reason we do what we do is because of a belief that these projects wouldn't get constructed without the subsidies. And, I think that if this is just a handout to developers, then we really should stop doing it. The developer math is, you're looking at incredibly high acquisition costs, incredibly high construction costs, and then your operating budget on the other side ultimately just does not support the amount of investment that's necessary to make the project happen. And I think this is something that, Heather looks at this in every single one of the applications. She documents that there is a financial need, that the project wouldn't be able to proceed without the incentive. And so I think, that's an important point for us to remember. I like Rich's suggestion. I would suggest that, maybe we can leave it at 20% on a per contract basis, but maybe cap the gross overruns to 2% of total project costs.
Okay, Kurt?
I was just going to say, I would, perhaps 20% is too high. You're right. If you look at a smaller proportion, it's not a big deal. But, if we maybe later can revise that to say it's a certain percentage of project cost, but, and again, I'm not a member of the IDA, take it for what it's worth. Set a blanket, which would be easier for me, at 10. And I would think that if there was perhaps the largest contractor, 10% really was, you're talking millions and millions of dollars, I would think that would move into the other extenuating circumstance that would elevate to the IDA board for review and say, yes, technically it fits the significant cost differential, but it's a big contractor and it matters. And I would just say you set a blanket now, and then it can elevate to the IDA board and we can revisit that later, is all.
Let's hear a comment on that suggestion. Todd?
I think that's a great suggestion. Yeah, it kind of leaves, it doesn't tie us to a certain thing like John was afraid of, and like you mentioned, Rich. I think that's a great solution.
Okay, Heather?
I was going to say, I'm skeptical of tying it to total project costs because those tend to vary and they may go up or go down over time. I'm wondering if the better way to do it is the value of that specific contract. If it's over $3 million, it's a 10% differential. If it's below that, it's 20% or whatever. I think I'd want it the other way around, but I wonder if you just peg it to the value of that contract. And if it's below a certain amount, then it's a lower percentage.
That's a great suggestion.
Jeff?
Yeah, I would support a 10% number or 10% on this. And I guess I would like us to try and keep it as simple as possible for this first run. And then as we get into this and we see what's happening, then we can always adjust the labor policy. But I get concerned about if we're tying it to total project costs or putting, numbers in there at a $3 or $5 million, and then we change percentages. I would like us to have a blanket one right now, and then we adjust later if we feel like we need to.
Okay, Laura.
Yeah, I actually like Heather's suggestion about tying it to the overall costs. I would also agree that the 20% is too high right now, so I would want to see 10% instead, with the option to look over this next year at what the impact is, and then possibly revise it as Heather has suggested, tying it to the project costs. But for now, I think it is probably a good idea to be consistent across the board and have a 10% figure.
Okay, Martha.
I'm looking at the clock. We're not going to finish this thing at all. This is something where I'd like to see proposals in writing because it's kind of hard to really digest. I would also point to packet page 10, when you've got, we can look back at our actual history of this good number of projects, where you've got, current, these numbers like City Center 52.7, that's the final total project cost. Is that right? What is that?
Application.
Yep.
That was the projected cost when they applied. So I think I would like to see, how do these things stack up? Maybe sort these graphs according to project costs and see if there's a pattern. I can't perceive it the way these are organized right now.
They are. The first one is City Center. That was the largest project cost. The one on the very right-hand side, Salt Point Brewing, was the smallest project cost.
Got it. Okay.
So
All
you
right.
can see for the most part that the smaller projects tend to get higher labor numbers. Not every single one of them, but overall.
So in a
Which
sense,
project was BNT Visions holding?
That was the clean room for economics. That was pretty
Right.
specialized work, and that's why you saw that being so low.
So you
Okay.
sort of see a break between Cargill and 323 Taganic. So, all right, I guess I believe that the fund balance policy issue is going to affect our decisions on Knickerbocker, and I would really be pretty upset if we don't get a chance to talk about that. Unless we talk about it, have a longer discussion at the next IDA meeting, but I doubt that would be possible either. But clearly, we're not going to finish this today, this whole discussion.
Well, what's the will of the IDA? Do you want to stop talking about the policy and pick up fund balance, or do we want to continue on talking about the labor policy and try to get as far as we can?
I'd like to continue. I think we made a lot of progress right now.
Yeah, I agree. In my mind, it's like if we switch topics now, we're going to get neither thing done. Let's get
Okay.
this thing done.
I'm
This
not
is a
gonna
good
vote.
I
policy.
agree.
I'm not going to vote for $500,000 to go to Knickerbocker until and unless we have a plan and a strategy that has been discussed by the full IDA for how our fund balance is going to be used. So I'll just say that right now.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well, we're going to have to work through that, and hopefully we can have that discussion. But let's march on. It's 12:30. We have a half an hour. Let's get as much done as we can. Ann.
Thank you. I would like to stick with 15% as the lowest cost differential for the labor portion, which can be compared, I think, by staff when you're getting those bids, not tied to the total project cost, but something easy for staff to look at when they're looking at the bids. If you go much lower, a cost that we're not able to figure out here is often when the labor is less money especially for the bigger projects, what's happening is people are often being brought in or coming in from other areas, they're having to actually then pay for a place to stay, the same as our laborers going to another area. So they're having to eat that cost of having to stay in another area, which lowers, again, how much they're actually getting paid net. So if we go too
Okay.
low, we're creating that.
All right, Mike?
I'm satisfied with Laura's, I'm satisfied with Ann's, so whichever the majority decides to go with is fine by me, so.
Okay. I'll jump in with a comment. I think I'd like to start at 10 and see how our policy works, and then perhaps adjust it, is my view. Let's see, Ann and Mike, are your hands still up or new up? Okay, Martha?
All right, I think we have a couple different things to vote on here. And if is it 10 million? Is it overall costs? Is it, and are there two different, is it a tiered criterion?
It sounded to me, Martha, as if we were suggesting a straight percentage and seeing how that works, but other things could come to us as other extenuating circumstances. So it'd come to the whole IDA.
All right, I'd like to say 10% then. That's what I would support.
All right.
Yeah, me too.
For now, do we have consensus at 10? Does that get the policy? You could raise your hands. No? Todd, it sounds like you're still at a higher number.
I'd like a higher, but I'd go with the 10. I'd like the higher, but I agree with
Okay.
Ann, the 15.
It looks like there's the votes for 10, but again, this is something I think we get the policy in place, run it, see how it works, and go from there. And that allows us to move forward to affordable housing. And why don't I call on Laura, since I cut you off earlier? Do you care about affordable housing, Laura?
Yeah, I think most people know that I am very passionate about affordable housing in the community for families, individuals. I think it makes for a more rich community in terms of diversity and all sorts of things. And so I would very much like to see an affordable housing exemption, because there are so many very competitive programs that affordable housing developments, I'm thinking specifically of INHS and Vicino as two prominent area affordable housing developers, and would hate to see time concerns have a negative impact on their competitive applications for grant programs, for example. I know that a few people, and I think Martha raised the question about the definition of affordable housing. And I think I would suggest that we look at the guidelines that are used by our developers of affordable housing in our community. And that's what I would suggest we look at in considering affordable housing. But I would very much like to see affordable housing be exempted from the policy.
Okay, Martha.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely essential that it's exempted. And we have been falling behind. We do it, the county does a housing snapshot every year. And we are, even though it feels like we have a lot of construction, feels like we have a lot of great subsidy, and affordable means subsidized through one state or federal program or another. And they usually mean only up to 80% of area median income. So it's very specific. It's not when, a private developer says, I'm going to try to keep the rents as low as I can. That's not affordable housing. So we have been absolutely falling behind every single year. I think it's one of the biggest crises of our community. So I would exempt affordable housing. INHS will tell you that it costs barely any less to build an affordable unit than it does a market rate unit. And yet for the whole life of that project, the income is a fraction of what the market rate unit can garner. So
Okay.
I would also, we have a housing policy. We have said that any housing that seeks IDA abatements either has to provide 20% of their own units up to AMI, 80% AMI, or pay into the housing development fund. So I think we've already recognized the need for affordable housing. I think this would, having to comply with local labor requirements would just go against all the other things we're trying to do to promote supply, development of supply.
All right, John.
There's a definition of affordable housing that's contained in section 581A of the real property tax law, which just states that it's real property used for residential rental purposes where at least 20% of the residential units are subject to an agreement with a municipality, the state, the federal government, or an instrumentality thereof, which agreement restricts the occupancy of those units to tenants to qualify in accordance with an income tax. It's broad. It covers everything that we might say. It's specifically means tested. So it's not just people are saying they're keeping the rents low, and there's good precedent for its existence. I think we should just adopt that and exempt any properties. We could discuss whether it's 20% or 100% or what percentage of the unit. But that's a pretty simple definition that does what we need.
Okay, Todd.
Rich, I was talking earlier about wanting to read something to everybody, so it's this is probably the perfect time for me to say right now. It's just something I put together just before the meeting, getting ready for this meeting. I got some mail over the weekend, and I looked at it. It was a letter for a donation request from Loaves and Fishes in Tompkins County. In the letter, they informed me of some real facts and numbers about a local community that really struck a chord with me, and I decided that I wanted to share it with everybody today. It was kind of alarming when they started saying all this. So they've been around for 38 years as a vital part of our community. They're open 5 days a week, soon to complete its 10,000th day of serving free meals without a break in service. That's unbelievable. Since March 2020, they have prepared 73,000 meals all to go. In 2020, 14,500 Tompkins County residents, almost 14% of our local population, suffered from food insecurity. More than 72% of their budget comes from donations. The work and services that Loaves and Fishes Tompkins County performs is both incredible and sad. It is incredible for what they do and for how they do it. It is sad and disturbing to see 14,500 or 14% of our local community struggling just to have a meal and get by. That's why, and before us, we have a chance to really make some big differences here. And I'm sorry, but I try to stay focused like Laura with the affordable housing, jobs. I mean, to me, they go hand in hand, and we got a really good tool here. I want the developers to come in and do the work, but my main priority is the people living here locally, working here, and being able to put food on the table. And by having a strong local labor language, you're giving a progression for somebody to get away from affordable housing and eventually be a homeowner and better themselves. It's just a path, it's an avenue. And I hate to see it locked out altogether because of prevailing wage because of affordable housing attached to it. If we do have something like that attached, I'd like to see a limit on it. And then something to strive for, see how it works, and then, okay, maybe we take that limit off, maybe we increase it.
Okay.
This is my thought.
All right, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, kind of to dovetail off of what Todd said, I appreciate the need for affordable housing, but I also, it's difficult because kind of under this policy, wouldn't then the worker kind of be subsidizing that affordable housing with their potential wages? I guess that's kind of where the rub would be. Listen, I guess too, are we talking about just affordable housing projects like INHS does, or are we talking about that? I mean, every housing development has to have 20%, right? So we're not including that, obviously, because that would include everybody. So it would just be, what, 100% affordable housing units is what I'm presuming we're talking about?
So the IDA's housing policy defines affordable housing as Units available, 100% of the units are available for households earning 80% or less of area median income and is subject to a regulatory agreement by a local, state, or federal agency for compliance for a period of at least 20 years. And
Okay.
I would recommend if we're
Okay.
going to exempt affordable housing, we just use the same definition.
All right. Thank you, Heather. That was great.
All right, I have Martha, and then I was going to make a comment, and then John.
Yeah, there's nothing that keeps, the unions from recruiting in the affordable housing developments that we incentivize. I hope they will. We are talking about construction. We already talked about construction jobs being temporary, a year and a half maybe. Whereas, as Heather just said, affordable housing is a 20-year investment at least, and anything for the housing fund is 49 years. We cannot afford to put any more road bumps, speed bumps in the development of affordable housing. It would just grind it to a halt. I would be deeply opposed to that.
I would jump in with a comment. I agree with what everybody's saying here, that, affordable housing matters, and we're spending time in this local labor policy because it matters too. And I'll put in a brief advertisement for the Career Pathways, which has been working with the local unions to try to create channels for people to enter the apprenticeship programs. I think this is great, what we're really talking and thinking about. As a way through, maybe we want to put affordable housing on a separate track where the developer comes in and talks to us about what is their commitment to local labor. That we don't exempt it entirely, but we have it as basically what we're doing now, that we added into the balance of all the other considerations, such as affordable housing, energy, permanent jobs, economic impact, and effect on tax base. That's part of the application, and we as an IDA look at it when it's an affordable housing project, that we consider it from that standpoint, that it is an important factor, but not the only factor. Let's see, I've lost track. John, and then Mike.
I guess I'm going to echo Martha's sentiment on. I think we cannot afford to put any road bumps in the process for developing affordable housing. I think Heather's suggestion of using the definition in our own policy is the right answer. And I just wanted to share a personal note of, that basically, close member of my family, spent time in affordable housing ultimately because she was a single mom leaving an abusive relationship and, was essentially unable to work because you can't afford to put two kids in daycare and, then, actually earn enough to cover the daycare costs. And I think that it's important to understand that while labor is, it's a fantastic path out of poverty for many people, and it's profoundly important, not everyone actually can, take and keep a job for a wide variety of reasons. And I think that it's really important for us to remember that the most vulnerable in our community are going to be served by these affordable housing projects for decades going forward. And we can't afford to put anything in the way of that. That doesn't mean labor is not important. I think that's why we're here today, but I can't support anything that puts any kind of a roadblock on affordable housing. I will vote against this policy if affordable housing is not exempted.
Okay, Laura.
Yeah, thank you. Similar to Martha and John's comments, I think that affordable housing is central. It is not an either or. I fully support local labor. It's not that I'm supporting exemption of affordable housing in order to diminish the local labor policy. Yet I know that affordable housing, as has been pointed out, this is housing that remains in our community to serve a vulnerable population for 40 years, for 50 years, well beyond the time of the construction jobs that go into building many of these affordable housing units. So I too, this is really important exemption for me. There are enough speed bumps to be overcome when applying for grant applications by affordable housing providers. So for me, this is a real central.
Laura,
key,
if I
and
can
I
interrupt,
would not
I
be
think
able
you
to
have
vote.
4 votes, I think, given the chat. But I guess I'd ask the question, I'd made a proposal saying, could we add something on projects that come before us that are affordable housing proposals to ask the developer what their commitment would be to local labor?
That's already in
And
our blanket,
Yeah,
in our
it's in the
application.
application.
Okay, but that would be
We're there.
part of our consideration there, that we could turn down a project because they say, we don't care about local labor, we won't use it. And we don't find that reasonable. So, okay, Todd,
This one, so is everybody, so nobody's in favor of putting a threshold there? You know, if a project's over this amount of money, we're gonna ask this. So I don't know what would be a good number to use if that's something that the committee likes, I don't know.
It sounds like at this
Not for
point,
an
Todd,
affordable housing project.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
it sounds like there is not for affordable
There's not,
housing.
okay. Okay.
Martha, did you have more?
Yeah, if I look at the graph, I think the only one that on here that's an affordable housing project was 327 West Seneca Street, a $1.8 million project, unless I'm incorrect. So Todd, you're getting 11 out of 12 projects.
I'm not looking at just the electricians, I'm looking at
know what I'm
non-union,
saying.
union, I'm looking at everybody, I'm looking
Yeah,
at.
this new policy is going to apply to everything except the specifically subsidized 80% AMI for at least 20 years housing projects.
We're getting looking at the graphs, we're getting all the smaller projects right now with local labor, putting a non-union, union people in the area, we're getting all that basically now.
And the
we're
whole
getting
point of this policy is that you're going to get the other ones too.
Okay, well, that does seem to be the consensus of the IDA at this point. I think we have to watch it and see how our policy works and see if we need nuance there. So if we can keep going, the next thing is MWBE
I want to
requirements.
actually ask for, I'd like to see a show of hands.
Okay,
Rich.
let's take a show of hands to exempt affordable housing. Yeah, okay, for now. That does seem to be the consensus. Kurt, did you have more?
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I raised my hand. I didn't mean to do it during the voting because I'm not a voter. That's totally good. I'm just gonna say I'm gonna pull from the housing policy language that you already have, just to make sure it's entirely consistent. And then I was trying to find that segue into the next one with the MWBE and Veterans Affairs. And I think personally, I think that would fall to try to expedite this, realizing that we've got time constraints. I think that falls under what was formerly titled a lack of workers exemption, but will be moved to qualified bids and or available workers exemption, those requirements. So you would say, I can't find these types of employees. And so that, that's I think that gets covered under what was formerly the lack of
Yes.
workers, but will be edited.
I think you're right. So I think we can go on to penalty. Is there a necessity of a clawback provision? Did somebody have a comment on that? John?
All of our policies are subject to clawback. If a project does not comply with our policies and is given an incentive, we have the opportunity to claw back.
Okay.
And I think that it would be bizarre for us to change how that mechanism functions for this one policy when we haven't for any others.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I was reading off the agenda that had a question mark there. So I wasn't advocating one way or the other. Laura?
Ditto what John said. I think we have a policy in place that is an overarching policy, and I would favor continuing with that rather than having something that is specific to this.
Okay,
one.
Martha?
I support that in part because I know what usually happens is staff is in touch with developers who are falling behind on whatever their requirements are supposed to be. And so if there's rather than sort of punish somebody, I would love to see staff saying, hey, I'm having trouble finding bidders. and work with staff to actually improve, to correct whatever the defect is. So I think seems to me our policy allows that to happen.
Okay. Anything further on that one? Kurt?
Just one comment. I don't necessarily have an issue with that. We could actually refer to the IDA language that, these are public benefit, et cetera. I can tie that into that language. The only thing that we discussed at the Labor Committee that I put forth for consideration is that I can only pull from the sheets that are given to me. So whether it be the employee name or a unique identifying number and the information that's given. In talking to Jim Lokey at whatever the most recent meeting in Cooperstown was, one of the things that he mentioned the importance of was reserving the right to have an independent auditor to say, I'm going to go check to make sure that Jim Smith actually worked during that period. Not to say we use it, but to reserve the right to use it. And I just bring that forward for your consideration as well.
Our standard certification policy has all that. We have the right to hire independent contractors to certify pretty much anything at their cost. Like it's standard language in our application.
Okay, Todd?
I think that's hearing Heather and Kurt both saying, I think that's great. That's something we definitely want to have. It's the only way to keep, unfortunately, to keep a lot of people honest.
Okay.
So if I reference the somehow come up with that, look back at the language that we already have, you're beholden to that and leave it at that.
I have some
I think
proposed language. If the applicant fails to comply with any of the requirements of this policy, the IDA shall have the authority to terminate or otherwise reduce any financial assistance at its discretion.
What is contained in our other policies about this? I mean, like our affordable housing policy, or do we actually have any explicit language to that? Because basically the applicant signing a contract with us that they will comply with all of our policies.
Well,
And
yeah,
I
the
assume that in
contract
that
says that they'll comply with our recapture policy. The certification in the applications certifies that you're going to comply with all of our policies. So it's there. Is it redundant to have it in here? Yeah.
Right. And I feel like it's like, this is covered, right? We don't need to invent something new here.
Okay. Anne?
I certainly don't think that it hurts to have it in here as Heather's detailing. The only thing I would add to possibly her language is something about, referring, say, as per our, referencing where that is in the contract, as per this, we reserve the right to, and then use the other words that Heather's saying.
Yeah.
Our policy can't reference a contract. Every contract is different.
Okay, right, reference the policy then? Right, because that language is in the policy?
We have a recapture policy. The certification on the application says that you have to comply with all policies, and I think it lists all the policies. And the certification specifically references the recapture policy.
So
if you're found to be in default of any of the policies, here's what we do.
Right. So I'm in favor of your language and just saying it that, and then just reference as per our policy, we would do this, because I don't think you can say this a number of times. I mean, when the contract or the developers have been at IDA meetings, sometimes, they don't have all of that in their heads. When we ask them about certain things, they're like, local labor, diversity, they don't have that all in their heads. I don't think it hurts to repeat it.
Okay. I'll jump in with a comment. Yeah, I don't have a problem with some redundancy here, as long as we're not creating any alternate language that is consistent. Yeah, so even redundant.
This is Russ. If you can hear me, I'm sorry I had to get on the road. We'll make sure the language is consistent, and if there's redundancy, so be it. But we'll make sure it's consistent throughout the documents.
Okay. I think we have consensus there. And I see we have 5 minutes to go. I think I failed utterly in getting us through this in time, but we'll we'll push to the limit here. Next up is timing, 75% overall or forward from non-compliance question mark. I'm not quite sure what that means.
No, I think that all goes away if we don't have a
It does.
specific. Yeah, so we're
John's right.
done. We fixed that.
Number 2 is gone, or what should be a B. Sorry, my outline was ugly. That stuff is over, and I think we've moved to 3. Instead of striking the section, we said just use the exact language that Heather's mentioned from our application or whatever.
Okay, could you just explain that? Because I'm still not sure I totally understand.
So my plan is based on today's discussion, the things that you have agreed upon, tracking changes, changing the policy, and then presenting it to the IDA at your regular board meeting next week. So what I would do is just add in whatever language is in our certification around recapture or non-compliance.
Okay, I guess I have a question on, do we feel comfortable going from 0 as our requirement to 75% all at once? Do we want to do something there to change that, to move into this, or to try to create nuance around the types of projects that are being addressed? I saw John first.
I honestly, with the modifications that we made to the exemption language and the other changes we made, I would support going to 100%.
Okay, Todd?
I personally think that like this policy, like we should encourage people to use local labor, and we've crafted a policy that allows exemptions in cases where that's impractical. And good for the first 75, why not the other 25?
So you're saying something on the order of, our policy is 100% unless exempted?
Yeah.
Okay, Todd?
I love that, John.
You didn't expect to get that big of a win from me, did you?
Okay, Laura? Or did you have more, Todd?
No, I love that.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable going to 100%. I wasn't sure I'd be comfortable with 75%, but I think some of the other revisions that we've made leave me comfortable with 75%. The question I have is always, devil in the details. What if there's 74% compliance? What do we do if someone is just about there, but not quite there?
Okay. That's a very good question. Let's get Jeff.
So initially, I didn't think I was going to be comfortable with 75%, but after the changes that we're making, and then actually after seeing what the other IDAs are doing, I would be very comfortable voting for 75%. I wouldn't be comfortable voting for 100% at this point.
Okay, Martha?
Yeah, I think if we put it at 100, then we're just guaranteeing that the staff has tons more work. I think we need to find a balance that otherwise every project is going to come with waivers that have to be reviewed. I think that's too much to ask of the staff. 75 seems like a good number to me.
Okay, Todd?
I was just wondering what the comments Laura made there as far as what happens if someone's a little shy of that threshold that the 75 we're asking. Can we, I don't know if Russ can answer this, or Heather, is there a way we could have something, if they meet that goal, they get the full amount of, whatever we're talking about? If not, it's like a phased thing where instead of getting 100% of that, you're only getting 75% of it. Is there a way to do something like that? Is that just a big headache?
According to the IDA's policy in terms of recapture, if they're not meeting all of the requirements, the IDA has the ability to reduce an incentive, to terminate an incentive, to recapture, an incentive that's already been delivered. And it really is a case-by-case basis of the IDA. I will say that every project is underwritten by a bank based on a sales tax incentive, a property tax incentive delivered by the IDA. So it becomes part of their financing package. If you determine that, you want to take everything away, that has some serious implications on their mortgage on the property. So, that's why it's a case by case basis, so that there can be some, discussion.
So in that case, like Laura mentioned, if someone was only like 74%, they could ask the IDA for, approval on that then. So as long as we know that they're close to it, I mean, we're right there at the numbers that Kirk showed. You're right there, about 67% now. So I'd rather aim a little bit higher, just to try to better things and move forward. So I'd support the 75% as well.
Okay, I note we're at 1 minute after 1. I'd ask indulgence for us to just go a little bit longer to see if we can wrap
I
this
have a
up to
1
get ready to
o'clock
vote.
meeting that I need to jump out, and I'm the host. I guess I could make someone else the host.
Yeah, could you make me the host or make Ina the host?
Does someone readily know how to do that? I've never done that.
When you leave, it'll ask you if you want to end the meeting or not, and you can say no.
All I have the option to do is end.
I think if you
Oh.
hit,
Okay. But do I need to make someone else a host?
yeah, I think you go to participants
Yeah, it's participants, and then there's an option to make someone
and make Ina the
Oh.
host, please.
or a host.
Make Ina the host with the most.
I have made Kurt the host.
Oh.
Okay. Host Kurt.
And thank you all.
Yeah, I'll wrap it
Okay,
up.
I certainly don't want to drag this on too
Thanks,
much
Heather.
longer, but let's finish our discussion if we can. Kurt, you're up.
Yeah, so I've really enjoyed this whole process and this discussion. I will say about the close enough, right? 74.5%, right? That gets elevated to the IDA board for review. And then I think the power lies within the IDA. You could technically recapture everything, or you could work with a developer to say, all right, I know you're gonna have another project. What else can we offer, right? You've got flexibility in deciding there. But if we start setting a gray line from 74.9% to 70.0, then somebody's going to come in at 69.9, where it's just getting fuzzy. If it's less than 75, it goes to the IDA and you all can decide what you want to do, renegotiate or recapture.
Okay.
We do this with a jobs report every year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
Same thing.
75%.
okay. All right, other comments? I'll jump in. I'm okay with 75, subject to the exemptions, as that's our policy, and we'll see how that works.
Couldn't get a second on the 100, huh?
I think for now, I guess, John, my concern is that we have these neighboring counties with labor policies that say 100%. And I really suspect it's nothing like that.
It's
Either
not.
They're
Yeah.
not policing it, or they're just giving an exemption for everything. I think we want something tangible that really does drive use of local labor as far as we can reasonably on projects, and recognizing that we're balancing lots of different really worthy policy goals with our labor policies, just such as energy, such as permanent jobs, such as affordable housing, building the tax base. All of that should work together. And, we've got the job of balancing. I think we can get there and adjust, as we see this in actual operation. So I'm pleased with how far we've come. But more comment? Are we commented out? Looks like we have something. So the plan, Kurt, is that we will get a further draft for our next meeting to actually
Yep.
vote on.
So I've got a logistical question for this team while I have you. Your next regular scheduled IDA meeting is next Wednesday, the 8th of December at 2:30 in the afternoon. I know, when's your drop dead date to get the packet out to the board?
We really try for a week prior, so that would mean tomorrow, end of business. We have pushed it to like the Thursday morning, just because we need to get it out, and on hard copy, need to be able to mail it. And folks from the public need to see
But a
it.
question for the board. we've talked about me using track changes, and I need to work with Russ and Heather to make sure that our language is consistent. I would like to show you the red line copy before it goes out with the board packet. If you could afford me a wait till Thursday or maybe Friday to get the packet, that would give me time to write, check down, and share with you for comment before it goes out. Is that too tight?
I mean, I think we could see this as a supplemental addition to the packet. We've all just been on this whole conversation. Really, what we're doing in the meeting is making sure that everything we just said gets captured and then voting on it. I don't know how others feel about this, but I'd be happy to see this by next Monday, separate from the rest of the packet, and just put a note on the agenda that we're going to get it, and it's going to it will be considered in the meeting.
Okay, Martha, you're on mute.
The last meeting, we got the whole Knickerbocker application on a Friday.
True.
Yeah, I think Friday would be great if it's possible, but yeah, as everybody will know to look for it. And it's better that you have like checked within staff to figure out, have you captured everything that was meant?
So I'm, just to be clear, I am sending you this policy with track changes in it prior to the packet. So you can look at it and say, yep, looks good, or this doesn't quite agree with me.
No, I think the packet is going to go out Wednesday or Thursday.
You can take more time.
Friday or even Monday if we get the red line.
Okay. I just want to be thorough. That's all, and meet your needs. But okay, we'll do it as a supplement. I know you don't need to wait for me then, other than put it on the agenda.
Okay.
Kurt.
So Kurt, you have what you need then?
I've got a whole pile of scribbles here that I'm going to go make sense of right after.
If you could share this with the IDA members, but also the people who contributed to the Labor Committee, that'd be great.
It will do.
And other than that, I would just like to say thank you to everybody. This was a hard meeting. We got through a lot of decision making, and I think we did it pretty efficiently. So appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Yeah, good
Thank
meeting,
you.
good discussions. Thanks, everybody.
Okay,
All right.
more
Good
soon.
meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Here.
Thanks,
Okay,
a lot.
Thanks, everybody.